Let's start right away by looking at the first TOEFL reading vocabulary word. And the correct answer is de-modify. And that's what adapt means. It means to change, to adjust oneself to different conditions or environments. You might see this with collocations like adapt quickly, adapt easily, adapt to change. And we see this a lot in biology when talking about animal adaptation. So we have a lot more vocabulary words to look at, and that's how this is going to work. You're going to have a timer count down, and you're going to have to try to find the answer. This is very similar to how it looks in the TOEFL reading questions. So you'll have more time than this on test day. I wanted to make the time short to give you a bit more of a challenge. But feel free to pause the video anytime that you need a bit more time to try to find the answer. But all of these words are very useful for the TOEFL reading because they are all academic vocabulary. Let's look at the next one. So the correct answer here is C, distribute. And so the word allocate means to distribute resources or duties for a particular purpose, allocate resources, allocate funds, allocate time. So this is very useful for marketing, for business, for everyday life kind of stuff. So we're going to do a lot more together. I should just introduce myself really quickly. I'm teacher Josh from TST Prep, and I've been doing this TOEFL prep stuff for a long time now. And these words show up a lot in the TOEFL reading. And besides that, I don't want you to just study a list of words. I want you to see how these words will help you on test day. That's why we're going to look at some words and look at the words like the TOEFL reading. These are just how the questions will look on test day. Let's take a look at the next one. All right, the correct answer is C, evident. So apparent means that something is clearly visible or understood or obvious. And some common collocations, apparent reason, apparent effect, apparent difference. It looks like this is the difference. So apparent is kind of like an adjective here to say this is what it looks like. It's used in all different types of topics. So this is how it's going to work. So I hope you're getting settled in and you're starting to get comfortable with the rhythm. If you want more TOEFL practice, not just vocabulary, but hundreds of reading and listening questions and a free TOEFL test, you can make an account at tstprep.com. It's totally free. I'll put a link in the description below to that so you can keep practicing even after this video. Let's look at the next one. All right, the answer is B, method. So approach is a way of dealing with a situation or problem. You've probably heard of the scientific method before. That's the way of doing science, a way of doing experiments. Approach the problem, approach carefully, holistic approach. So this is the way of conducting something, your approach. For example, a holistic approach is popular in education to talk about ways of measuring students' progress besides just a test, right? So sometimes test scores can be pretty frustrating and can make you feel really nervous. So teachers will grade you on participation, on projects, on that kind of stuff. So that is approach, different ways of doing something. Next one. Correct answer is B, logical. So if something is coherent, it makes sense, it's consistent. Coherent argument, coherent structure, coherent policy. Sometimes I remember my university professors would to say incoherence on my essays, which means it didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. My body paragraphs were all over the place. So that is coherent. If something makes sense, it's logical. So it's like a fancy way of saying makes sense. It's coherent. Next one. So here the correct answer is C, gather. So compile means to assemble information collected from other sources. So it's basically to kind of like get a bunch of different things and bring them together, is to compile something. Compile data, compile a report, compile statistics. So this is good when talking about the process that students use to get information about an essay or to perform experiments. You have to compile data. If you're reading something about researchers, you might read about how they compiled information, how they gathered and collected information. Next one. Here the correct answer is C, enhance. So this is a good example of how the TOEFL can be a bit tricky, where you might know the word compliment. Oh, you compliment somebody and say they look nice or that you like their haircut or something like that. But you're not sure which of these words mean the same thing. So C is the best answer, enhance. A thing that completes or brings to perfection. If something complements, it makes it better. But we can also use it in talking about art. Let's say the colors of that painting. This color complements that other color very well. It makes the other one look better. It enhances. Common collocations include complement each other, complement the flavor, complement the design. So talking about art, talking about maybe culinary skills like food. This wine complements this dish very well. It brings out the flavor, makes it better. Next one. Here the correct answer is A, element. So it's a part or element of a larger whole, is a component, so it's a part of something. And you could say a key component, a major component, component parts. This shows up all over the place in all different topics. It's a fancy way of saying part. Let's say, for example, a key component of doing experiments is to control variables. You're trying to make sure that nothing interferes with your results. That's a key component. It's a very important part. So it's a fancy way of saying part, component. Next one. All right, this is a word that you might see a bunch, comprehensive, but you're not really 100% certain what it means. It means thorough. So it means complete, including all or nearly all elements or aspects of something. So if something is comprehensive, it means it includes pretty much everything. Comprehensive review, comprehensive coverage, comprehensive approach. If you're doing a comprehensive survey of your school, you don't just ask the students, but you also ask the staff, you ask the principals, you ask the parents. That is a comprehensive survey. You ask all the stakeholders, all the people involved in the school. Now, if you're looking for a comprehensive approach to the TOEFL of getting your score as quickly and as easily as possible, check out the emergency course for the TOEFL by TST Prep. We have study plans for people if you're studying for 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 1 month. It's perfect for anybody who just needs their score as quickly and as easily as possible. This includes not just a course, but it also includes hundreds of practice questions. It includes complete tests, everything you need to get your score. Check it out. If you just want to get, all the information you need in one place to get the highest possible score in the quickest amount of time, the emergency course is exactly what you're looking for. And this offer is only for the YouTube audience, so be sure to follow the link in the description to get that discount. All right, next one. Here the correct answer is C, formulate. So this is one of those words, again, conceive, which you know but can't really explain. It means to form or devise a plan or idea in the mind. So I hear it the most with this collocation. You conceive a plan, which means you make a plan. Conceive an idea, conceive a notion. You have an idea, you have a plan. Conceive is like the first part. I guess you would hear it a lot when talking about the history of science, where you're reading about researchers and scientists who conceive an idea, conceive a hypothesis, and then do experiments to try to prove if that's true or not. So that's conceive. Next one. Here the correct answer is D, idea. So concept is like a fancy way of saying idea for the most part. An abstract idea, a general notion. Yeah, so it's a bit more abstract as a concept. Idea, notion, theory, principle, core concept, basic concept. When you're learning about any topic, it'll say like a core concept of. Core concept of biology is evolutionary theory. So that is a core concept, an important idea. So concept, you think concept, think the idea. Next one. Conduct is a way you behave. So the manner in which a person behaves, especially in a particular place or situation. Criminal conduct, course of conduct. You might hear it when somebody's giving you rules. When you go start a new job, they might have a course of conduct, the way they expect you to behave. This is how you should dress. This is how you should speak. This is how you should work. This is your code of conduct or course of conduct. And yeah, it's a way of saying behave. Next one. All right, the correct answer is C, significant. So considerable is a very useful adjective, means important, basically. Here, the definition says notably large in size, amount, or extent. Considerable amount, considerable influence, considerable interest. This is a kind of fancy way of saying big or large, a large amount, a large or big influence, a considerable interest. So when you think of considerable, think an adjective like big, important. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, restrict. If you constrain, you severely restrict the scope, extent, or activity of. So you constrain growth, you restrict it. You constrain development, constrain opportunities. You make it, you restrict it, you limit it. A parent who is very overbearing, doesn't let their kids go outside, makes their kids stay in their room all the time, doesn't let them hang out with other kids. They might be constraining their development, restricting their development, not giving them that freedom and opportunity the kid needs to develop. So that is constrain. Next one. All right, the correct answer is B, use. And I love this word consume. It's very useful. It means to use up, consume resources, consume energy, consume time. I just think of it as eating, just like yum, 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 yum. You consume something, you eat it up. If you consume resources, that means that you take away the resources. Resources are things like food or energy or water. Those are resources. Maybe the animals in the area consumed all of the resources and there's nothing left to eat. Okay, so we can use it in a lot of different ways. We can use consume in environmental studies and science and biology. We can use it in marketing and economics. Consumers, people, we are consumers, the people who consume, who use up, who buy. So lots of different good uses for consume. Next one. All right, you probably know this one. Contemporary means modern. It means living or current at the same time. So contemporary, we usually think about it as modern, as right now, but it pretty much means at the same time. You know, if you were talking about the past and you were talking about Ernest Hemingway, who lived 100 years ago, a contemporary of Ernest Hemingway was F. Scott Fitzgerald. They were contemporary, so they were living at the same time. But usually we think about it as modern right now. You could think of a topic like contemporary dance. That is a modern dance that we do right now, contemporary. There's contemporary issues, so issues we have today, contemporary society, contemporary trends. So these are, it's usually used as an adjective to say that something is happening right now. So before I get to the next one, if you're finding these helpful, please like and subscribe. It really helps me grow and helps the students like you learn more about this test and learn about vocabulary. So if you find it helpful, give it a like and subscribe. Be great. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is A, transform. So if you convert, you change the form or character of something. You convert energy, convert data, convert currency. And I think of it with currency the most in my everyday life is if I'm traveling, I'm in Japan and I go to America, I have to convert the money. I have to change my money from Japanese yen to American dollars. That is conversion, convert. You probably hear about this a lot in science when converting energy, when changing energy from you're converting running water into energy that you can use to power your house. That is converting energy. All right, so it's used in a lot of different ways. Very useful word, especially in academic reading that you'll get on the TOEFL, convert. Next one. Next one is B, collaborate. So this is cooperate, you work together to work jointly towards the same end. So of course, I think you know cooperate. I know cooperate. I just had to read it to make it clear. But you cooperate with, cooperate in, cooperate on. So you work together with people. So it can be used in a lot of different ways. You might use it in sociology or anthropology to talk about different groups of people cooperating together, working together for a common good. Or maybe two businesses cooperating together to help improve both their businesses. Yeah, so it's cooperate. Next one. Here the correct answer is D, organize. So to coordinate, bring the different elements of a complex activity or organization into a relationship that will ensure efficiency or harmony. If you are coordinating, you're organizing. You coordinate efforts, coordinate activities, coordinate plans. I'm just learning that coordinate is hard to say. In some sports, for example, and I watch American football, there is a coach called an offensive coordinator, which means that their job is to organize the offense, or a defensive coordinator to organize the defense. They say, you're going to play here, you're going to play here, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. That is, they're organizing something. They are coordinating something. So it's good for coaches, but on the TOEFL, you can hear about it when talking about politics or with contemporary issues. Like, so if you have a big project in government, when you want to build new roads, that's a lot of coordination. That's a lot of organization. You have to hire a lot of different types of people. You have to plan, long term. It requires a lot of coordination. Next one. So the correct answer is C, standards. So criteria is one of those words you've probably heard before, but can't really explain. Like you kind of get it, but it's a little tricky, at least for me. And it's a principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided. Some common collocations include meet criteria, selection criteria, eligibility criteria. So that eligibility criteria is probably useful for you when you are thinking about college. They say, okay, to get into the school, our standards, our criteria, you need this SAT score, you need this TOEFL score, you need these grades, that's their criteria, their standards. Even teachers have a grading criteria. They say if you want to pass this class, you have to get this grade and you have to do this and you have to do that. So criteria. Next one. Here the correct answer is B, sequence, so a cycle. So this is one of those that you probably knew what it meant but weren't sure like which choice is the best. This happens a lot in the TOEFL where that's why I'm giving it to you like a TOEFL situation, because there's words that like you know what they mean, but you have to choose between 4 choices and you don't really like any of the choices. Like I didn't like sequence so much, but that's just the best choice out of all of them here. So a cycle is a series of events that are regularly, there's another hard word, regularly repeated in the same order. You can think about it like a loop, a life cycle, a business cycle, a cycle of events. I always think of the circle of life. It's called circle, but you could think about it as cycle of life too. Birth, living, and death, that is the cycle. Okay, it goes in this order. So that's the sequence. I mean, sequence is, this is first, this is second, this is third. So that is the cycle. Next one. Here, the correct answer is D, infer. So if you deduce, you arrive at a fact or a conclusion by reasoning. You draw a logical conclusion. So deduce is really good for academic English because you have to deduce a lot of things in academia. So not only do you have to, basically make a logical conclusion based on experiments, you also have to do that when you're studying history. You don't know what happened in the past. You have some resources that you're going to look at, and then you have to make a guess. You have to deduce. You have to make a conclusion based on the information, based on logic. You deduce from, deduce that, deduce conclusions. So in academia, we're doing this all of the time, is that we're seeing information, and it's not complete, but it's what we have, and we have to make good conclusions, logical conclusions, based on that information. That is deduction. That is when you deduce. Next one. Here the correct answer is A, prove. So to demonstrate something, you clearly show the existence of a truth by giving proof or evidence. So you demonstrate effectiveness, demonstrate how, demonstrate ability. I always think of presentations as demonstrations. Let me show you. I have to demonstrate. Here, this is it. This is my demonstration. It's like a fancy way to say show. And in academic English, I would say that this shows up a lot in talking about the results of experiments, and that's the sentence that they give, is that the experiment aims to demonstrate the effect of reduced sunlight on plant growth. So demonstrate. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is, what is it? B, extract. So if you derive something, you obtain something from a specified source. You derive it. Derive from, derive pleasure, derive benefits. So if you want to make some type of medicine, a lot of times you have to get the ingredients from nature, from different plants. And so they are deriving the ingredients of new medication from plants. We can also use that somebody derives inspiration from. So when you see a piece of art, when you hear a song and you think like, I've heard this before, this sounds a lot like somebody else, right? We could say that they are inspired by something or they derive this sound from somebody else. Okay, so it's used in a lot of different ways, but you could think about it basically as like you get from something else, you derive, you get it from something else. Another example, just really quickly, is that you could say that animals derive nutrients from. So maybe this type of animal eats some types of plants and they derive energy from it. So derive. Okay, next one. Here the correct answer is B, discover. This is another one where like I don't really like any of the answers, but discover is the best one. Detect, it means to identify the presence of. I like that definition more than discover. When you detect something, you're like, oh, something's there. I can feel it. You know, that something's there. I found it. That is, I guess it is discover, but that is identify the presence of. I like a little bit more. So that is detect, and I always think of a detective. So they are looking for clues. They are trying to discover clues. I guess discover is a good word. But anyway, so that is to find or notice or observe. And common collocations is detect the presence, detect changes, detect signals. In academic vocabulary, we'll hear this a lot in science and in astronomy, in detecting things in the universe. You find something, discover something new. Always finding new things when looking in the stars. We detect new things all the time. Now, before I go on, make sure if you're finding this practice helpful, we have hundreds of additional free TOEFL practice questions, not just vocabulary, but a bunch of different ones, all the types that you'll see on test day for the reading and listening, and also complete practice tests, all for free. Follow the link in the description below. You can make an account there. Let's go to the next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, diverge. So if you deviate, you depart from an established course or norm. Deviate means to go away from what's normal. Deviate from, deviate significantly. A good example might be when you are doing research and you expect to see something and then you see something different. You know, that deviates from the norm. It's something different than what you expected. Next one. So to differentiate, the correct answer is C, distinguish. It's to recognize or ascertain what makes something different. So it's basically a fancy way of saying make something different, differentiate. So you could think of that if something is different, you can differentiate from. If you want to differentiate from somebody, you have to change yourself. So I hear that phrase a lot. Differentiate from, differentiate between, differentiate based on. So I have a friend and he's a twin. They both look exactly alike. And when they were kids, they dressed alike, they looked alike. People could not tell them apart. But as they got older, they wanted to differentiate from each other. They wanted to look different from each other. So one started growing his hair longer, another started to shave his head, one started wearing Hawaiian shirts all the time, and another started wearing suits. So they started to differentiate. They tried to show difference in some way. And it's used all over the place in different academic topics, really useful word. And you could just think of the root word different, make something different, differentiate. Next one. Correct answer is A, to decrease. So you make something less, you make it smaller, that is to diminish. You reduce, decrease. diminish capacity, diminish value, diminish importance. So I like the phrase diminish value. That is used pretty often in marketing and business when something is just becoming less and less and less valuable. Maybe a company, maybe a product, it's diminishing in value. It's becoming less and less and less and less. I heard a good example when they were talking about, a man was talking about his job where he made horse saddles. So this is way in the past, and somebody said, well, that's a job you'll have forever. Everyone always needs a horse saddle, right? A seat for a horse. But the value of that diminished greatly as more people bought cars, right? So that is diminished to make less and less and less, decrease. Next one. All right, display means be, to show. You make a prominent exhibition of something in a place where it can easily be seen. So display, I think you probably know this, display information, display artifacts, display exhibits. So a museum displays certain artifacts, it shows certain artifacts. Your school might have a display case with trophies and awards at your school. That is something that they're gonna display, that they're gonna show. So it's a fancy way of saying show when you display something in a large area. Next one. Correct answer is C, unique. Distinct is unique, recognizably different in nature from something else of a similar type. We like to say that people are unique, everyone's different, everybody is distinct. Unique is a good synonym that something is distinct. It's clear, it's separate, it's unmistakable. Distinct features, distinct categories, distinct differences. I think of a peacock, this type of bird. It has a very distinct look. It has these beautiful feathers and that have many colors. It's very distinct animal, very clear. So it's a good adjective to use in academic vocabulary. It's used in all different types of topics to say that something is unique. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, specialty. So domain is one of those words that is like maybe you've heard, but it's kind of hard to define. But in academia, in college, it's a specified sphere of activity or knowledge. So a domain of experience or a domain area. So, for example, if you are studying ancient Egyptian history, that is your domain. Astrophysics is not part of your domain. That's not your area of expertise. So that is domain. What area of expertise you have. You could think of it as a fancy way of saying field or area. Your field of study is your domain. Next one. All right, to control, be, dominates. Like this word, dominate. Have a commanding influence on, exercise control over. You might have heard this word before. I hear it in sports a lot, like one team dominates the other team, like they just totally win. But you can dominate the market, the stock market. Apple dominates the cell phone market. Just they sell more iPhones, way more than any other company. Dominate a sport, dominate the conversation. One animal might dominate a bunch of other animals. If you're talking about environmental studies or biology, dominate. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is A, length. So duration, the time between which something continues. So it's like length, time, period. Duration of time, duration of the contract, duration of the effect. Let me talk about duration of the effect. So let's say, for example, you have to take some medication. There might be some side effects. They might tell you, you might feel this way for a few hours. That's the duration of the effect. That's how long it might take. So duration is how long something will take. You hear it a lot in a lot of different academic topics. It's basically saying like how long something's going to last. Maybe in history, talking about the duration of a leader or of a certain war or event. But for the most part, it's used all over the place. Duration, length of time. Next one. All right, if something is dynamic, it's changing. So that's one of those words you probably hear a lot and you kind of understand, but can't really articulate. So let's say it right now. Let's articulate it together. It's characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. So that is dynamic. Something is changing a lot. If something is stable, it's not dynamic. I could think of a dynamic environment like the modern age right now. It's constantly changing. There's always new websites, new technologies, new ideas. There's trends that change, new fashion. This is a dynamic environment. This is very different than maybe Europe in the 1500s, 500 years ago, where it was a much more static environment. It didn't change very much. Everyone kind of agreed that this was the way life is, this is what you wear, this is how you act. It was more stable, not as dynamic. There are dynamic relationships, dynamic economy. There's a lot of different ways of using dynamic. It's very useful, used all over the place in academia. Not stable, it's constantly changing. It's dynamic. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is D, permit. So enable is to give someone or something the authority or means to do something. So somebody lets you do something. They enable you. So enable access. They give you access. Enable users. They let users do something. Enable features. They open up features. So it's like opening, you could think of it as like opening a door is enabling. And these examples here are used a lot in like computer science and software and everyday life. Like pay this money, you'll be able to enable the features of this app. You could think about it like that because you have an app and you have ads and there's a lot of things that you don't like. And so you can buy it and then you can enable features. You can get permission for a lot of features. On the TOEFL, you might see it with topics about modern technology, and they might talk about ways that they enable people to do things. YouTube enables people from all over the world to gain access to education. In the past, if you wanted to learn about the TOEFL, you had to either buy a book or go to a class in your community. Now you can do a Google search, you can find somebody like me, and that has enabled you to get better prepared for this test. So that's an example. All right, next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, meet. So encounter is like a fancy way of saying that you meet somebody. The definition is an unexpectedly experience or to be faced with something difficult or hostile. Encounter problems, encounter resistance, encounter opportunities. So you meet problems, you face problems, you encounter them. And so this will be used a lot when talking about animal behavior. Animals will encounter a lot of different issues. Maybe they'll be hunted, maybe they can't find food, maybe they have to start a family. They are encountering, they are facing a lot of different challenges. So that is encounter. You experience something. You face something, you encounter it. Used a lot in academic English. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is B, implement. So you enforce something, you compel observance of or compliance with a law or rule. So you enforce the law, enforce rules, enforce standards. I think about this word a lot with like police where they have to enforce. So there's a new rule or new law from the government, and it's the police's job to enforce, to make you do it. We can think about it also in class. So let's say, for example, your teacher has a rule that you have to raise your hand before you answer a question. Now, some teachers enforce this rule very strictly. You can't speak unless you raise your hand. Some teachers, you could just speak and they'll call on you anyway. So they don't enforce it very well. But that's enforce, is to make somebody do something, usually a rule or a law. Next one. If you enhance something, you improve it. So intensify, increase, or further improve the quality, value, or extent of. So enhance performance, enhance quality, enhance capabilities. I'm sure you hear this a lot nowadays in modern technology. They're always trying to enhance the experience of a camera or a computer or a app. They are enhancing things. So you'll see it when talking about modern technology and maybe talking about, is social media a positive or negative thing, and talk about some ways that it has enhanced your life. Enhanced. Next one. All right, so this is be arrange. So this is one of those words that you probably hear a lot, format. Be arrange is the best answer. So arrange or put into a format. Format a document, format data, or format a disk. So I think you'll think about this a lot with something like Microsoft Word or an essay that you have to write for school. Your teacher might say, okay, you have to format it this way, your essay. Here's the format. Use this font, make it this size, make sure you double space, make sure you have page numbers. This is the format. This is the way that you're going to arrange. This is the way that these are the rules that you have to follow. This is the format. Next one. Here the correct answer is C, system. So it's a basic structure. Underlining a system is a framework. So you could think about it as a structure, but like the base of the structure. And it's used a lot for things that are not physical. So not really like a building, but more like a country's rules is the framework, or a business's rules. That is their framework, their regulatory framework, conceptual framework, policy framework. It's kind of like the basic structure of the business, the basic structure of the country. I hear about this a lot in government and politics, and you could think about it like the framework for the United States starts with the Constitution. That is their document that's a framework for the way the government operates. All right, so you'll hear it a lot when talking about business or government is framework. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, basic. So forming a necessary base or core, the central importance. I think that's a good phrase. Central importance is fundamental. It's very important. Fundamental principle, fundamental rights, fundamental changes. Fundamental principles of experimentation is that you have to control variables, you have to make a hypothesis. That's some of the fundamental principles. Or some fundamental ideas of anthropology is that you should try to not use your own cultural background to make judgments on other people. That is a fundamental principle of anthropology. So it's like basic. It's one of the most important things to consider is fundamental. You might also hear the phrase fundamental rights. We hear about that a lot in America, where you have the right to free speech. Carrying a gun is something that comes up a lot. That's a fundamental right, a basic right. And so, yeah, hopefully you know that fundamental. Next one. This word, the correct answer is D, belief. I actually don't think you're going to see it on test day. I just hear it a lot on the news, so I thought it might be helpful to include here. It's a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory. Political ideology, ideological differences, adopt an ideology. The best example that I could think of is thinking about communist government is a communist ideology, a way of thinking about government, and a capitalist ideology, a way of thinking about government. So that is a system of ideas. All right. But I don't want to spend too much time on that. You probably don't need it for the TOEFL. But I thought it was a useful academic vocabulary word to know. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is A, enforce, just like we saw before, right? So you heard the word enforce, and it's similar to meaning implement. I gave the example of enforcing rules in class that a teacher does, raising your hand. They implement a rule. You could say that as well. So it's put a decision into effect. You implement a plan, implement changes, and implement policy. That is to start something. Implement a plan is a good example that you start a plan, you start something that you've been planning for a while. All right, similar to enforce. Next one. All right, if something is implicit, I like this word. It's not stated, unstated, eh? So it's implied, not plainly expressed, implicit understanding, implicit agreement, implicit trust. The opposite of this is explicit, to say directly. So implicit. Let me give you an example of something that's not implicit, that's explicit. If my mother says, go clean your room, that is explicit. It's very clear. Go clean your room. That's what she wants me to do. Implicit would be something like, Josh, your friends are going to come over today in your room. She's implicitly, not saying it directly. She's saying go clean your room, but not saying it directly. That is implicit. You would hear about it a lot in implicit understanding. That would be something in business and politics and government, is maybe two countries, they don't have an official agreement, but they kind of understand, okay, you don't do this and I won't do this. That is implicit. Next one. Here the correct answer is B, show. So to indicate, to point out, to show something is indicate. It's like you're saying, look, here it is. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. That's indicate. You're basically showing people, hey, look at that. That's indicate. You can indicate problems that somebody says, hey, this is an issue. This is a problem. You might hear about this in history a lot. Somebody's pointing out a problem. Indicate changes, indicate a direction. So yeah, you're showing something. You're saying, hey, look at this. You're pointing it out, you're indicating. Next one. All right, the correct answer is D, cause. So this I hear a lot in medical texts. So to induce something, induce labor, induce vomiting, induce effects, which means to bring about or give rise to. So induce labor is when somebody is pregnant and they are, they're having contractions, they are ready to have the baby, but it's taking a long time. It's taking too many hours and it's starting to get dangerous for the mother. So they might induce labor. They might find a way to start the labor, to start getting the baby out of there. So that is to induce, to make something start. And you'll hear it a lot in medical vocabulary. I hear it pretty often. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, intrinsic. So inherent is existing in something as a permanent, essential characteristic or attribute. So it's intrinsic, it's fundamental, it's built in. I like this phrase, built in. It's something you can't get it out. If something is inherent, you can't get it out. Inherent risk, inherent qualities, inherent characteristics. So for example, I like the phrase inherent risk. You know, if you want to start your own business, there is an inherent risk. You could lose all your money. Your business could go bankrupt. That's part of making a business. You can't take it out. It's inherent. It's inside of there. Talking about zoology, like animals. So lions hunt and eat other animals. That's an inherent quality of lions. You can't take it out of lions. It's just kind of built in there. It's inherent. So you'll see it a lot of different ways, but those are a few examples. Next one. So if you inhibit, you see restrict. You make something less, you hinder, restrain, or prevent something. Inhibit growth, inhibit activity, inhibit development. Let's say, for example, when talking about environmental issues, and there is too much carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere from cars. Lawmakers might try to inhibit the amount of carbon dioxide by making new rules and laws. That is a inhibition. So I hear this a lot with environmental issues. When trying to make them a bit more manageable, they will try to inhibit certain polluters, things that make more pollution. So that is inhibit. Next one. Initiate is to start. I like this word. You cause something to begin. It's pretty simple. You just start something. It's just a fancy way to say start. So you can initiate a project. You start a project. Initiate changes. You start changes. Initiate a discussion. I would say initiate a discussion is a good example of, like, let's say politics. When talking about two different countries, they're going to try to solve an issue. They're going to initiate discussions. They're going to start discussions. Or initiate changes, you try to start changes in some way. Okay, so that's initiate. Next one. So if something is integral, it is B, essential. You need it. It's necessary. It's crucial, an integral part, an integral role. So something is so important. It's essential. You need it. It's integral. Comes up a lot in a lot of different academic topics, and it also comes up in the TOEFL, which is why it is essential, it's integral that you check out tstprep.com to prepare for the TOEFL. You can get hundreds of free practice questions, free practice tests, all for just making an account at tstprep.com. I'll put a link in the description to that essential, integral resource. So the next one. The correct answer is D, period. So interval. It's a space between two things. So it comes up a lot. Time interval, interval of time, interval between, interval training. I actually hear a lot about interval training with, if you're doing like trying to build muscles or trying to get in shape, exercise for 60 seconds and then rest for 30 seconds and then exercise for another 60 seconds. Those are interval training, length of time intervals. When talking about history, they'll talk about the interval between when this ended and when this started. There is a large interval between the end of the Roman Empire and the start of the Renaissance, the interval of time. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is D, enact. If you invoke something, you call on it, on a law or a right or a deity, a god or goddess, for help as an authority. Invoke a law, invoke a policy, invoke authority. So you might say, for example, if there is a time of crisis, one thing that came up in the last couple of years was COVID, and that they invoked new laws and new rules and new restrictions. They said, okay, this is going to be a law. You can't leave your house or you're going to get arrested. That they invoke a law. It's when it's a law and you have some power to do it. So this will come up mostly in government stuff when talking about contemporary issues. Religion doesn't come up on TOEFL. So yeah, just mostly government stuff is invoke. Next one. All right, this is a good word to learn. Isolate is B, separate. Cause a person to be or remain alone or apart from others. Some synonyms are separate or segregate. Isolate variables, isolate issues, isolate patients. Let's talk about patients. So that's another good example from COVID. If somebody, or just any illness that can spread, if there's somebody that can give their sickness to somebody else, you want to isolate that patient. You want to put them in a corner somewhere away from everybody else. You want to separate them. You want to isolate them. Isolate variables. That's something you want to do in experiment. So there's a lot of different useful ways of using isolate, but it's basically to try to make something separate. Next one. All right, the correct answer is A, uphold. This is one of those words, maintain, that you know, and you're like, I don't know, is it A, B, C, or D? I guess A is the best answer. Yeah, you're right. So maintain is to cause or enable something to continue. Yeah, it's basically something is staying, it's maintaining. We can use it with you maintain stability of something. So if you want to try to keep a good relationship, you might have to make sacrifices. You might have to have difficult conversations. That is trying to maintain, to keep the relationship for as long as possible. In academic vocabulary, it might be talking about maintaining the situation between two countries. It could be maintaining the stability of an environment. I hear a lot about invasive species. That's when a species comes from outside that messes up the stability. The stability of the environment is no longer maintained. So it's used a lot of different ways, but it's to keep things stable and reliable. Next one. All right, this is one of those words that you know, but you're not sure which one. It's C, process is the best answer. Mechanism, I would have a hard time defining it if I didn't have the definition written right here. A natural or established process by which something takes place or is brought about. So it's a process. You could think about a defense mechanism. This is probably the best example. Animals have certain ways of protecting themselves. These are their defense mechanisms. A skunk has very stinky water that it sprays out, that is their defense mechanism. A porcupine has all these spikes on his back. That is his defense mechanism. So that is his process or way that something comes about, is a mechanism. All right, next one. So if you monitor something, you observe it, D. So to observe and check the progress or quality of something. So yeah, you're observing, you're checking, you're monitoring. You monitor the progress, you monitor performance, monitor conditions. So you might hear this when reading about researchers. They're checking their experiment, they're checking the process, they are monitoring, they're looking at it, they're checking it. When you're taking a test and you maybe looking at, your friend or something, your teacher might be angry. I guess they're monitoring you, they're checking you during the test. So yeah, that's monitor. Next one. All right, if something is mutual, it is C, reciprocal. The definition is of a feeling or action experienced or done by each of two or more parties towards the other or others. The famous phrase I have in my mind is that you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. That's mutual. That's reciprocal. Mutual respect, mutual agreement, mutual interest. So we have the same things. You do this and I'll do this. It's mutual. Reciprocal. We'll do things back. There's even a phenomena called mutualism, which is when two species help each other in some way. I don't know an example off the top of my head, but for example, a smaller fish will latch onto a shark, and the shark will let the fish stay there because the fish helps the shark in some way. That's mutualism. Helps each other out. Reciprocal. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is A, idea. There's even a famous website called Notion now, which is a conception or belief about something. Notion of, popular notion, general notion. It's basically a way of saying an idea or a belief is a notion, something you think, something you feel. The sentence they give, the researcher dismissed the notion that cold weather alone could cause the common cold. So somebody says, I don't like that idea. That's not a good idea. So when reading about somebody's ideas or somebody's complaints, they might talk about these notions. So that's when it could come up. So there's a lot of different ways, but maybe talking about the history of science is when it would come up most often, this word notion. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, acquire. And the word is obtain, which means to get, acquire, or secure something. So it's a fancy way of saying getting for the most part. You obtain approval, you get approval. You obtain information, get information. Obtain results, get results. So obtain can be used in business. For example, obtain approvals, you get approval for something for business, or in government and politics. And it could also be used to talk about obtain information, so getting research or finding data, obtaining, getting something. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is B, fill, occupy, reside or have one's place of a business in a building. So we think about it a lot with occupy in an actual physical location, like I'm occupying this room right now, I'm in this room right now. Sometimes we say, like, if you're wanting to go to the bathroom, it might say occupied. Somebody is inside there. But it can also mean have a position, something more not so physical, but more abstract. So for example, a position at work is, I want to be the boss, but the position is currently occupied. Somebody else is the boss right now. So means it's filled, it's already being used by somebody else, it's occupied. We can talk about this with zoology, talking about environments that are already occupied. A lot of different ways to use this. But anyway, yeah, so there's something there already, or there's some person there already. It's occupied. Next one. This one is a little tricky. The correct answer is D, balance. Like when I hear the word offset, I don't think balance immediately, but that pretty much is what it means for the most part, is that you counteract something by having an equal or opposite force, so offset. So for example, if you have a business and you just lost a lot of money, you might try to offset that by firing some people, by letting go of some people. So you want to try to make that even again. You want to balance it again. That's offset. You might offset, so that's offset costs, right? That expression. Offset emissions, so we hear about this in environmental issues. There's more carbon going into the air from cars, so maybe we can try to plant more trees to offset those negative emissions with more positive emissions. Offset impact. So that's offset. You want to try to make something balanced. I think those are two good examples too, in environment or in business. Next one. All right, the answer is C, continuous. The word is ongoing. It means it keeps going. It hasn't reached its end. And so it's an ongoing process, ongoing study, ongoing support. I think this is pretty simple, that it's just continuous. It just keeps going. And I'm going to keep going right now. But before I do, make sure you like or subscribe. If you're this far into the video, I believe that you're finding it helpful, and I would appreciate your support by liking or subscribing. But let's keep going in this ongoing video of TOEFL reading vocabulary. Next one. All right, output is B, production. And you probably hear about this in manufacturing. Output of something, how much something is made by a factory. The amount of something produced by a person, machine, or industry. Increase output. You want to make more things. You want to output more. It's used in industry a lot because output is when you are what you are producing, what you are making. So it makes sense for it to be so common in manufacturing. So that is output. Next one. All right, here's a useful word for when you're doing research. It's the limit, A. So a parameter is a numerical or other measurable factor forming one of a set that defines a system or sets the conditions of its operation. Common collocations are set parameters, within parameters, outside parameters. I would think about this in terms of an experiment. So if you're going to set parameters, let's say you're going to do an experiment, something about your school. You're going to say, okay, we're not going to interview the teachers, we're not going to interview the staff, we're not going to interview parents, we're going to only interview students, and we're only going to interview students that are in junior high school and they are studying math 2, okay, I don't know, whatever class. So you are setting the parameters to junior high level math 2 students. Those are the parameters of your experiment. So that's the limit, that's the boundary. Those are the parameters. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. Next one. All right, I love this word. The answer is C, occurrence, not that word, phenomenon. I think it's very interesting pronunciation. I like the when you say a phenomena with an A at the end. And so what is phenomenon? So it's a fact or situation that is observed to exist or happen, especially one whose cause or explanation is in question. So that in question, what does that mean in question? That means that they're not sure what it means, where it comes from. A good example is anything involving aliens. If you see, a red light in the sky and it's unusual, they don't know what it is. It's some phenomenon. And so they can't explain this phenomenon here, this red light in the sky. But we could also use it to explain things we do understand. You could explain lightning, for example. Lightning is a natural phenomenon. There's also, besides weather, we could talk about social phenomenons, things that occur, that happen in society, and that are very popular. Maybe 10 years ago now, there was a song called Gangnam Style, and that was a social phenomenon. Just everybody knew the song, people did the dance, and now I'm doing it in my head right now. That is a social phenomenon, a social occurrence, something that happened, phenomenon. Next one. The next one, proceed, is C, lead. Yeah, this one is a little tricky because A, B, C, and D, none of them are great answers, but it basically means to come before. You can look at the prefix pre, which means before, and so precede means to come before. Proceed by, precede the event, precede the introduction, and then to go before, right? We would use this a lot with talking about history. This king was preceded by another king, so another king came before this king. But we can also use it by talking about the history of the earth, like geology. You know, this event was preceded by this event, talking about the ice age maybe, or talking about different geological ages, preceded by. So it can come up in a lot of ways, but especially when talking about the history of events, preceded by. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is B, accurate. So precise, I always think of this hand gesture here, like precise, just right here. I wink my eye and I put my fingers together, precise. Or I think of maybe somebody who does archery, they have to be precise, or they practice shooting, you have to be accurate. You're marked by exactness and accuracy of expression, precise measurements, precise language, precise terms. I just do this when I say precise. So precise means that you're going to use it as an adjective to emphasize that something is exactly right. It's important, it's useful, it's accurate, it's precise. So accurate is the right synonym there, precise. Next one. D is the correct answer, dominant. So predominant, and then you see the word dominant, you're like, that can't be right. It's too much like the word. So the TOEFL does try to trick you sometimes. They might give you something tricky like this, so just be aware of that. But yeah, it means dominant, and I believe we talked about that word already. So it's the strongest element of something, that a team dominated another team we talked about. That is the verb form. But here, predominant is more of an adjective. Yeah, predominant feature is more common, I would say, as an adjective than dominant feature. I think you know what it means. Dominant is pretty important, the most important thing, strongest element. Next one. All right, preliminary is initial. So we have that prefix pre, it usually means before, right? So proceeding or done in preparation for something fuller. Preliminary findings, that means that the first findings. So when you start a new research project, usually it takes a long time. There's a lot of things you have to do research on. You might do some preliminary research first, some basic research first, before you go into the more comprehensive, the more in-depth research. So that is preliminary. It's the kind of start, the preceding element of something. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, fraction. So proportion is a part share, or number considered in comparative relation to a whole. So basically what that means is part. So it's a part of something, is a proportion. If I have a pizza, right, I'm going to take one slice, that's one proportion, one slice, one part of the pizza. So you can get a large proportion. I'm going to take 6 slices, proportion of, in proportion to. So that phrase, in proportion to, is comparing sizes. So for example, my salary is large in proportion to my neighbors. It's maybe large compared to my neighbors, but it's not large when compared to people in the city. But so basically just think of proportion as a size, as a set size of something, and it's a part of something. It's a proportion. Next one. All right, super useful word, qualitative, which means descriptive, relating to, measuring, or measured by the quality of something rather than its quantity. So I didn't include quantity here because I figured I'd talk about it with this one. Qualitative research, qualitative data, qualitative analysis. That's where you'll hear this the most, talking about data. So usually we use qualitative with quantitative. So quantitative means quantity, how much of something. So quantitative data is more about having a large amount of data. And qualitative data is more about focusing on the quality of the data, having good quality. Next one. So refine has 2 meanings. One way is to think about it as purify, and that's to remove impurities or unwanted elements. That's part of a process. So for example, refined oil. So when you get oil from the ground and it's not really ready to be used in a car yet, you need to refine it. You have to clean it up. But you can also say it to refine techniques or refine methods. So you can use it for yourself when you're trying to get better at something. So for example, if I start making YouTube videos, maybe the camera quality isn't good, the video's not great, the audio doesn't sound good, it's not that interesting, I speak too long, maybe right now I think I'm speaking too long, but I need to refine my process. So I slowly get better, I get new lights, I get better cameras, I know more about editing, I'm refining, getting slowly better and better. So you'll hear that a lot about experiments and researchers refining, making something better and better, making it pure, not pure, but just making something a better process. They are refining it, improving. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is D, pertinent. If something is pertinent, it's relevant, closely connected or appropriate to what is being done or considered. So relevant information, relevant details, relevant data. So it is pertinent. So maybe the word pertinent is not a great synonym. Applicable, germane, appropriate. I think appropriate is probably the best synonym here. Basically, if something is relevant, means that you should know about it. For example, if you're taking the TOEFL, you probably don't need to learn about the IELTS. It's not relevant for you. It doesn't really apply to your situation. But if you're trying to decide, do I want IELTS, do I want TOEFL, then it's relevant. Then it applies to your situation. So that's relevant. It's pertinent, it applies to you, it's helpful to know. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is D, asset. So a resource is a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, or other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. So we could think about it like this, like business as a resource. So businesses have money, they have staff, they have buildings, they have equipment, That's a business's resource. But we could also think of natural resources that we have in our environment. Maybe we have certain trees, so we have wood. We have certain farmland that we can use to grow crops. So we can use those resources, natural resources, to benefit our lives in some way. Or there's oil, and we can use that to sell to other countries. There's human resources. This is also in organizations. They help pay people, give people money, and also help settle issues between staff. Resource management. This is managing how the resources get distributed. So resources are anything that we can use, can be used in business, can be used in environment, can be used in politics, can be used in biology, can be used in environmental science. Tons of ways. Resources. Really useful word. Next one. All right, the correct answer here is A, limit. To restrict something, you put a limit on it. Restrict access, restrict movement, restrict growth. And I think of COVID again, there was a lot of limits to what we could do. You couldn't go to your job. They shut down jobs, and traveling on public transportation. There was a lot of limitations. Maybe I have some restrictions for my children. They can't, stay up after 10 p.m. or they can't play video games for more than an hour or two a day. Those are some restrictions. I restrict what they can do. So it's usually somebody with more authority putting limits on something that you can do. That is a restriction. You put a limit on it. Restrict. But one restriction you won't have is if you visit tstprep.com and you make a free account to get access to hundreds of free practice questions and a free TOEFL test. Check that out, tstprep.com. I'll put a link in the description if you want more practice. So hopefully you're finding this helpful. I assume you are if you're still here. This is a super long video. But we only have about 10 more left, 11 or 12 more left. So let's keep going. Almost done. Next one. Here the correct answer is C, stiff. So if you are rigid, it's unable to bend or be forced out of shape. Rigid structure, rigid rules, rigid frame. Yeah, so it's a way of saying that something is hard to change. You could say that any organization, a school, a company, a business, even a society might be rigid, might be strict. Next one. Okay, so the next one, scenario, is D, situation. So the definition of scenario is a postulated sequence or development of events. It's kind of hard. Basically, it's a situation. So a possible scenario, worst case scenario, scenario planning. I like the phrase worst case scenario. I think that's pretty useful. It's when you imagine what's the worst that could possibly happen. So you're imagining a situation in the future. So worst case scenario. You have to do that a lot as a politician or as a business owner or, as a human, really. You have to think like, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst possible situation? So that's a scenario. And let's go to the next one. Here the correct answer is A, range. So scope, the extent of the area or subject matter that something deals with or to which it is relevant. So it's kind of similar to a word we talked about, parameters, where parameters were the kind of limit of what you were going to do. And inside that limit is the scope, how far it stretches, the scope of research. So if you remember in the last example, we talked about parameters of an experiment. We're going to do an experiment in school. We're going to take a survey, but we're going to set parameters, and we're going to find out what's the scope inside those parameters. So let's set the parameters. We're not going to ask teachers and staff. We're only going to ask students. But we're only going to ask junior high school students. And we're only going to ask junior high school students who are taking Math 2. Those are the parameters, and inside that, that's the scope of the research. The scope of the research is the Math 2 junior high school students. That's the scope. So it's within the scope. If we want to expand the scope, maybe we'll ask all junior high school students. Okay, so that's expanding it and changing the parameters. All right, so that's scope. Next one. All right, I think you know this one. It's so useful because it comes up so much. Significant is notable, sufficiently great or important to be worthy of attention, noteworthy. Significant impact, significant difference, significant increase. So a noticeable increase, an important increase. Just think of it as like big increase, big impact, big difference, significant. Next one. So here the correct answer is D, imitate. So to simulate something is to imitate the appearance. You mimic, you replicate it. Simulate conditions, simulate environment, simulate behavior. I think of this smaller word, sim. There was a famous game called The Sims, which was a computer game, which was a simulation of everyday life that we experience. You played as a character that lived in a house in the suburbs and had a family and had neighbors, had a pet, and had a job. It was The Sims. It was a simulation of everyday life. If you are training to be a pilot, you're not going to train in a plane at first. The consequences are too great. If you mess up, you die. So you don't want to start with a plane. You want to start with a simulation of a plane. So you get into a simulator and you practice flying that way. So this is to simulate, is to imitate the conditions. Next one. Here the correct answer is A, adequate. If something is sufficient, it's enough, it's adequate. Sufficient funds, you have enough money. Sufficient time, you have enough time. Or sufficient resources, you have enough resources. So it's a useful word that's used as a phrase. You can think about it in finance, you could think about it in everyday life, you could think about it in anthropology. The opposite of this is also very useful, is insufficient. They might say that this community has an insufficient amount of resources, not enough resources to survive. It's not sufficient, it's insufficient. Next one. Here the correct answer is B, support. Is to strengthen or support physically or mentally. You can sustain growth, sustain pressure, or sustain interest. I hear about sustain interest a lot for YouTube because I need to work on making sure that people are interested. So I need to change the camera angle, have some graphics to sustain interest. I don't think I do a good job of it, but if you're here, that's great. Sustain growth is that you support growth, you keep growth. This is used a lot for economics. Countries like America in a capitalist system, you have to keep growing. You have to keep making more money. You have to sustain it. You have to support it. That's sustained growth. All right, so sustain. Next one. Here the correct answer is B, broadcast. So broadcast or send out, it can be used in a lot of different ways. Everyday life, we think of transmit as talking about like transmitting a signal, like a radio signal or a TV signal from one place to another place. So we definitely use transmit that way. But it can also be used when talking about medical issues. We always hear about transmitting diseases, diseases that go from one person to another person. That is transmit. You can also transmit data, sending data from me to you. I'm going to transmit it. Transmit information, transmit disease. So a bunch of different fields, a little bit of a different meaning, but but always the same, that it's going from one place to another place. Transmit. Next one. All right, if you undergo something, you experience it. It's an experience or to be subjected to. And it's usually unpleasant or painful is to undergo something, undergo surgery, undergo training, undergo changes. So these are experiences that you probably don't want. And again, this is something I hear with medical terminology a lot. Undergo surgery is a great example that comes up very often. Undergo changes might be, something in a business where it's an uncomfortable change in the environment and change in society. Or undergo training. Maybe you have to train to be in the army and you have to do this, uncomfortable experience of undergoing training. Next one. All right, if you utilize something, be, employ. It's basically a fancy way of saying use something or make something useful. So you make it practical or effective to use. Utilize resources, utilize technology, utilize data. So for example, if you have a lot of information on your computer, but it's just sitting there, you never use your computer, all you do is surf the internet, you're not really utilizing the power. You're not using the power of your computer and the data you have. So maybe you want to utilize that power that you have and you want to make use of it. Used in a lot of different ways. It can be used in computer technology, could be used to talk about public environment stuff, utilizing resources. Tons of different ways you can use this. Next one. All right, here the correct answer is C, well-being. So welfare is the health, happiness, and fortunes of a person or group. I always think about social welfare, where there are government programs to give some people who are struggling some money for food and some basic necessities. It can also be used for the welfare of a group of people, that they are in a positive situation. Or if you want to care about the welfare of a species, maybe there's a species that's becoming extinct and you care about their welfare, their well-being. So you care about the welfare of those animals or for that group or for that species. So yeah, it's like a way of saying well-being, and it'll come up in public policy or in talking about environmental issues is welfare. Next one. All right, last one. Widespread is C, extensive. Found or distributed over a large number of people. It's widespread, widespread use, widespread support, widespread interest, used all over the place. But you might hear about it in politics when there's a famous politician and they have widespread support. A lot of people like them. Or there's a technology that everybody uses. It has widespread use. So that's widespread, and that is the end. Congratulations. There are a million other things you could be doing besides trying to improve your vocabulary for the reading. Thank you for being here. I hope you found this helpful. And yeah, this is a long one for me too. I noticed my lights went out in the back, but we just powered through it. And so thank you for being here. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're crazy enough to try more practice, check out this video here, and I'll see you in the next one.